In the midnight glow where the stars align, we lose ourselves in the rhythm divine. Underneath the sky painted with dreams we're chasing.
Welcome to episode 4. Today we're going to talk about the planets in astrology. The planets represent the different parts of your personality and our life experiences. So each one symbolizes a unique type of energy. It's like how we think, how we feel, how we love, how we take action, and how we grow. Each of these planets move through the zodiac signs and the houses, shaping your personality and the way you interact with the world. Together, this tells the story in your birth chart.
Yeah, definitely. And we talk about the planets and the luminaries. Technically, the sun and the moon are luminaries, but we kind of lump them all in as planets. Even Pluto, who we did not demote in astrology. Pluto is a planet to us. Good old Pluto. He's kind of a big deal, actually, in astrology. But we talk about the planets and luminaries as the what in the chart. And we've talked to you about the signs and the houses as the how and the where. The planets are what subject we are talking about. Your Mercury would be about how you speak, how you learn, what you like to talk about, what you think about. That's the what. And then the how is the sign that it's in. How does that express? And then the where, the house, where in your life does that show up the most? So we are on to the what, the planets and luminaries. And we'll start with the sun, because that is the one that most people at least have an idea of what their sun sign is just based on their birthday, because the sun moves 1 degree per day and it takes 30 days to get through a sign. So 1 full year to move around the zodiac, which is why in astrology we call your birthday your solar return, because the sun has moved all the way around your chart and returned to the exact degree at which it was when you were born. So the sun is really your core self. It is your life direction, ego, vitality, your self-expression. It's creativity, confidence, your individuality, really. It is one of the personal planets, so it defines your core essence. The personal planets are the ones that most form your personality. And it rules Leo, the sign of Leo. And it's kind of, the sun is your main character energy, is the way I like to describe it. And how you express yourself and what you're growing into. The traits and themes you're meant to embody more fully with time. As with all of the planets, really, we are maturing and evolving through them to express their higher expressions. Because, when we're younger and not as mature, sometimes the shadow sides of these things come out more, right? So we're trying to evolve all of the planets. An example, a Leo sun may feel alive when creating, leading, or performing, versus a Capricorn sun might seek accomplishment and steady progress as a way to express. The sun influences your overall confidence and how you define your sense of purpose. It shows how you want to be seen and what you're becoming more of with each passing year. So some of the shadow sides of the sun, if it's not expressing at its highest, can be ego inflation and shrinking to please others, needing validation to feel worthy, feeling lost without recognition or purpose, and may manifest as pride, stubborn identity roles, or fear of being unseen. But the sole lesson: to express your light, live your truth, and cultivate a solid sense of self. You're here to become who you truly are, not who the world tells you to be. It's really about authentic expression. Do you have anything you want to add to that?
No, I think you covered it all very thoroughly. That was awesome. All right, on to the moon. And the moon rules Cancer. And the moon is our emotions, our inner world. It's our intuition, our subconscious response. This is what we hold most private. So when people meet us, they don't necessarily see your moon sign. They see that later when they get to know you more, or when you're backed in a corner. And then your moon sign is revealed by how you react to that. So it's how we process our feelings, how we care about others, and it's also about what comforts us. It reflects how we react under stress, how we instinctively respond to life. So it's kind of like our innermost private part about us. Do you have anything to add to that?
Sure. Yeah. I think maybe the shadow side, I'll add on the shadow side expression of each planet and luminary. So the shadow side of the moon would be maybe clinging to emotional habits that no longer serve you, overreactions, kind of like you mentioned. It's your reaction, right? So it could be moodiness, emotional shutdown, letting past wounds dominate present choices, really carrying those wounds with us. Our moon is very delicate, it's sensitive, and really doing that inner work with your your moon, especially working with your moon is really important with your moon in your chart. And specifically the sign and house it's in, you add layers of information on how to help work with your moon and your emotional self to do a lot of this healing. Yeah, you may avoid vulnerability or regress into childhood patterns under stress. Those are just kind of some shadow expressions of the moon. You're trying to honor your emotional needs and create inner safety with your moon. You are trying to develop emotional intelligence and nurture your inner world. Yeah, learn how to self-soothe and support your emotional wellness. It's a part of maturing into your soul's alignment. Okay, Mercury. Mercury is about the mind and communication, and Mercury actually rules two signs, both Gemini and Virgo. It is another personal planet, like we talked about, and it rules your mental processes and how you express thoughts. It takes about 15 to 60 days to move through each sign and approximately 1 year to orbit all signs. It varies a little bit with retrogrades, and it is about your thinking, learning, communication, curiosity, perception, logic, speech, analysis, reasoning, and it shows up as basically your learning style, how you solve problems. An example maybe would be a Mercury in Aries might be direct, fast talking, and assertive, versus a Mercury in Pisces might communicate with compassion, metaphor, or emotion. And sometimes a Mercury in Pisces even is more poetic in the way they speak, and it might not come across as clear and direct as like that Aries. Mercury also reveals your sense of humor, how you relate in conversation, and how you form opinions or gather knowledge. So some of the shadow sides of Mercury might be overthinking, gossip, talking over others, mental distraction or avoidance of feelings, using logic to avoid deeper truths, so kind of emotional bypassing, if you will, can also show up as nervousness, self-doubt, or over-identifying with your thoughts, really living in your head. But ultimately, at its highest expression, Mercury is thinking clearly, speaking your truth, using your voice consciously, and connecting the mind and the heart to become a conscious messenger of your truth.
Yes, I love that. All right, on to Venus. So Venus rules Taurus and Libra. So Venus is how we love. It's our values. It's our pleasures, our beauty, harmony. It shows you what you're drawn to and how you attract relationships, whether romantic, social. Your Venus sign speaks to how you give and receive affection, your sense of style, your core values around connection, money, and self-worth. It's the planet of romance, magnetism, and creativity. So really, Venus is the lover. It's our heart. Is there anything you want to add to that?
Yeah, that's so great. That's actually how I describe it when I am doing readings too, is Venus is where your heart is. In the shadow side expressions, this can show up as people pleasing, dependency, or staying in unhealthy relationships, seeking worth through money, beauty, or approval, overindulgence, or attachment to superficial things. Think ruling Taurus. Taurus likes material things, right? And may avoid conflict or betraying yourself to be liked. People pleasing ultimately, but expressing at its highest, it really is about truly loving yourself and aligning with your values and being open to beauty and connection in a healthy way to attract what aligns with your soul rather than what temporarily soothes insecurity. It's about beauty and harmony and really true connection coming from an authentic place. Really, I'm going to use the word authentic a lot because so many of these personal planets are about authentic expression. It's about, instead of trying to, conform to everyone around you and fit in or, kind of do what's expected of you. It's about learning your personal planets, the signs they're in, and how they like to express best, and staying grounded and centered in that and expressing in this really true to yourself way, because that ultimately is what we're here for, right? And coming from a very loving place, of course, in a very centered, loving, healthy place, but expressing in a way that is so authentic to you, because that's really, I think, the most radiant thing that we can do is align with our authenticity.
Yes, for sure. And I just wanted to clarify on the personal planets that we're talking about. That would be your sun, your moon, your Mercury, your Venus, and Mars. So these planets shape your personality, like our basic needs and how we express ourselves in everyday life. So they move quickly and vary significantly from person to person.
And that's such a good point, Jody, that because they are the faster moving planets, they move so quickly through the signs that from person to person, they vary a lot versus the social planets and the outer planets. They're moving so slowly through the signs that whole generations will have a planet in the same sign before it moves. So it feels a little less personal. The house is going to be different for everyone based on your rising sign, but it feels a little less, the sign part of it feels a little less specific to you versus your personal planets, because they are fast moving. Those are the ones that really shape your core personality. On to Mars. Mars is about our drive and action. And Mars rules Aries, the first sign in the zodiac. So think initiation, action, right? Energy, desire, motivation, courage. This is the warrior in the chart. Sexuality is wrapped up with Mars. Conflict, ambition, pursuit, stamina, very energetic words, right? So another personal planet here, and it takes 1.5 to 2 months to move through each sign and about 2 years to complete the full orbit through the signs. So how does Mars show up in your life? It's your ambition, libido, and instinctive reactions, how you pursue goals and handle conflict. Here's some examples. Mars in Leo might charge ahead with flair and confidence, versus a Mars in Cancer may act only when emotionally secure, right? That's going to act in a very Cancerian way. Mars isn't the most comfortable in Cancer, so it's going to sit back until it's ready to react. And Mars really represents your inner fire. It shows you where you take initiative and what drives you and how you assert your will in the world. On the shadow side, kind of some obvious things you might think, right? And it could be aggression, dominance, impulsiveness, right? There's a real speed associated with Mars and Aries as well. Suppressed anger or passive aggression, avoiding action out of fear or burnout. And it can express as rash decisions, competitiveness, or burnout from misdirected energy, honestly. But ultimately, it's just trying to assert itself with clarity and courage. Honoring your desires and using your energy with intention is a great way to express Mars, and taking action that aligns with your truth, not ego or fear.
On to Jupiter. Jupiter rules Sagittarius. Jupiter is the planet of abundance, of growth, of expansion. Jupiter is all about wisdom, our spiritual insights. It governs our beliefs, our optimism in the area of life that we seek meaning and growth. Your Jupiter sign shows how you approach faith, learning, travel, and philosophy. It brings opportunities and blessings, often where you're willing to take the leap of faith. It also reveals where you inspire others and how you expand your worldview.
I will say we now have moved into the category of social planets. So this is the first social planet, Jupiter and Saturn being the social planets, which shape cultural values and personal development. There's kind of a life lesson that you've sort of signed up for when it comes to these planets, particularly Saturn, but Jupiter as well, like you talked about around belief and meaning. And as you said, Jupiter really is so expansive that kind of wherever it ends up in your chart really kind of magnifies and blows up that area in your chart. It's a big energy. But when it shows up in its shadow side, it can be overconfidence, exaggeration, or entitlement, escaping challenges through unrealistic optimism. That's a Sagittarius thing. It's attached to Sagittarius. And as a Sagittarius, I will say that is a real thing. Sometimes it's kind of that overly optimistic pie in the sky ideal, like seeing the best in everything and everyone and clinging to that as reality instead of actual reality. I'm just speaking for myself. Something that I've learned, particularly in relationships, I will say, falling in love with the idea of someone or the ideal of someone versus who they really are. I did that in the past. Fortunately, I learned to correct that, and I'm very happily married. Anyway, so yeah, I would say the sole lesson for it is saying yes to growth, take leaps of faith, explore life's possibilities, align your personal beliefs with a deeper sense of truth and integrity. It really is ultimately so much about meaning and purpose in life. Okay, Saturn. So Saturn is basically the opposite energy. It's almost like I kind of think of Jupiter and Saturn as an in-breath and an out-breath. Saturn is kind of restrictive. It is about responsibility. It's rules. There's another way I like to describe it as Jupiter is the frat boy on the yacht and Saturn is the cop who's pulling up going like, hey, what are we doing here?
Yes, for sure.
It's the very push-pull energy, right, between these two planets. This is the second social planet, like I said, and there's very much a karmic tie with Saturn, and not karma in the way that I think we typically think of karma. We think of karma as we did something naughty and therefore, in a past life or something. And so now somebody's going to do something terrible to us in equal measure. And it's not really that. I mean, it is just an energetic thing, but in evolutionary astrology in particular, we talk about that you signed up for these things. Your soul chose the lesson specifically of Saturn to move through in this lifetime. It is ultimately a gift, but it's through hard work and discipline and very much a lifelong learning of Saturn's lessons. It takes 2.5 to 3 years to move through each sign and 29.5 years to complete full orbit, which is your Saturn return. You may have heard people talking about your Saturn return. It's a pretty pivotal moment usually, and there are things attached to it, but it is ultimately meant for your evolution. It's such a gift that comes through sometimes difficult things. It is discipline, structure, maturity, responsibility, boundaries, resilience, integrity, time. It's literally like father time, wisdom, and perseverance. And it rules Capricorn. As we're talking about each of these planets and how they express, you can really hear that echoed in the signs that they rule too. Like you hear a lot of Saturn in the descriptions of Capricorn. So it shows up as your challenges you face that shape your inner authority and your strength. It's where you feel tested, where life slows you down. Because again, it's time. It's a one step in front of the other, a lot like Capricorn, right? Like that goat climbing the mountain to try to get to the peak. And it is slow and steady. So a lot of times Saturn lessons take a while, but you're ultimately trying to build something real and something lasting. Saturn in the 7th house, as an example, may bring hard relationship lessons, versus Saturn in the 10th may demand perseverance in your career. Saturn reveals where the universe holds you accountable to your soul's blueprint, helping you grow wiser through time. Some of the shadow sides of Saturn can be fear of failure, procrastination, or excessive self-doubt, over-identifying with rules, roles, or expectations, becoming rigid, cold, or overly harsh with yourself or others. But ultimately, the soul lesson for Saturn is to build long-term structures that support your soul's purpose, to show up with integrity, act responsibly, and commit to personal growth.
Yes, I like to call Saturn our greatest teacher.
Yes.
So if you're on the right path, it's going to be there to support you. If for some reason you're not on the right path, it's going to be there to remind you get on that path. And how much we resist determines on what kind of reminder we get for Saturn.
Yes, definitely. Ultimately, I will always reiterate this on this podcast and in all of my readings that every single one of the planets is working for your highest and best. It might not always feel like it. It's going to be uncomfortable sometimes. But ultimately, all of the planets are acting out of love for you and what is highest and best for you. So as a good parent, right? Because we also associate Saturn with the father. And as a good parent, there's disciplinary action sometimes because you know that ultimately from a loving place, that's needed and necessary. And Saturn kind of does that sometimes.
Yes. All right. We're moving on to our generational planets. So these are the slowest moving planets and they shape our entire generation. So this would be like some of them go over many years, but most people in your age range are going to have like Uranus, which is the next planet I'm talking about, in the same sign as you. So then how that is personalized to you is we would look at what house it is in your chart. So Uranus is the planet of innovation. Uranus is like the disruptor. It comes in and it breaks the mold. It represents sudden change, genius, disruption, liberation. It governs revolutions, breakthroughs, originality. In your chart, Uranus shows where you resist conformity and are called to be different. It sparks awakening and invites you to think outside the box. It's about surprising twists of fate, electric energy, and personal or a collective rebellion. So Uranus is like the rebel.
Yeah, so Uranus rules Aquarius. Takes about 7 years to move through each sign or 84 years for a full orbit. So if you're lucky, you might have a Uranus return. And that's what would happen at 84 years. But the shadow side of Uranus expression is restlessness, unpredictability, or emotional detachment. That's something that you can find with the sign of Aquarius as well. Sometimes just needing to emotionally detach in order to push forward. A lot of times Aquarians feel like they can't be bothered with the emotional side of things. They just have to keep moving towards their goals, but learning to balance and know that emotions are here to serve us as well. There's maybe a fear of intimacy disguised as independence, right? You're going to keep those boundaries up because again, that fear of emotions, you're going to be like, I'm too busy to get too close to this person. Rejecting structure or stability, even when it supports your growth, is another shadow expression. Ultimately, the soul lesson for Uranus is to embrace your uniqueness and liberate yourself from outdated conditioning, to allow change as a path to authenticity and expansion. And there's that word again, but in particular with Uranus, that is a word that is associated with Uranus almost always, is authenticity. It is radical self-expression. And yeah, then there's an expansive quality to it as well, a lot like Jupiter. Okay, Neptune. And here we are again, switching up with a very different energy from Uranus. Neptune is all about dreams and spirituality. It rules Pisces, so that tells you a bit more about it right there. It takes 12 to 14 years to move through each sign and 165 years to make a complete orbit through all 12 signs. So nobody that I know of has ever had a Neptune return. Neptune is our imagination, it's mysticism, dreams, compassion, also illusion, delusion sometimes on the shadow side. It's also our intuition. There's strong creativity about Neptune, inspiration, surrender, and oneness. Those are two big ones that really go with Pisces as well, is like full surrender to the divine and to really trusting all of this, trusting, like we talked about, that all of the planets are working for your highest and best, that your chart is there for a reason, that you chose these things. Ultimately, your higher self chose these things. And it's surrendering to that knowing, even when it feels scary. And that really we are all one, and that when we look at one another, we're looking at a mirror of ourselves. And Neptune really understands that deeply. So Neptune is where you blur the lines between this world and the divine. It's where the veil is thinnest. We talk about that with Pisces as well. It's your capacity for compassion, fantasy, and spiritual connection. Neptune in the 5th house, for example, may inspire romanticism or artistic gifts. Neptune in the 12th may heighten psychic sensitivity and a deep need for going inward and quiet time with yourself, meditation, those sorts of things. Neptune's very comfortable in the 12th house because it would be the natural home of Pisces, which it rules. Neptune governs the mystical, magical, and the invisible, where you long to merge with something greater. But on the shadow side, it can be escapism, avoidance, or spiritual bypassing. Addictive behaviors are very much attached to Neptune because when you're feeling so much, it's really easy to want to escape all of that because it can be very overwhelming. My Pisces friends completely understand that feeling of being so overwhelmed by feeling everything all of the time that it's really easy to want to numb and escape. So addictive behaviors, illusion, sometimes codependency, and there's a difficulty seeing clearly or setting boundaries. It's the feeling of like kind of being in a fog. And when you're in a Neptune transit, it's really a good idea to consult people that you trust before making decisions because you may not be seeing clearly. Just ask for other people's insights that you really trust when you're dealing with Neptunian subjects, because sometimes your own vision of what's happening might not be as clear as you think. But ultimately, the soul lesson of Neptune is to develop spiritual discernment and align with divine truth, to express compassion, creativity, and inner wisdom while remaining grounded.
All right, now on to Pluto, which is still considered a planet in astrology.
Yes, it is.
Pluto rules Scorpio. It symbolizes deep transformation, regeneration, and power. It rules the cycles of death and rebirth, both in a literal and a metaphorical way. Your Pluto placement reveals where you may experience intense change, power struggles, deep healing, or emotional evolution. It pushes you to face your fears and shadows, ultimately helping you rise stronger. So Pluto works slowly but permanently, often bringing profound psychological shifts. What would you like to add?
So Pluto rules Scorpio. So again, you can take a hint about what Pluto is about from the sign of Scorpio, that depth, that transformation. And it takes 12 to 30 years to move through each sign. It is the slowest moving planet. It is way out there. So 248 years to complete an orbit, and it varies by zodiac position. But some of the shadow sides of Pluto can be obsession, manipulation, secrecy, power struggles, holding on too tightly, or resisting the necessary death rebirth cycles. We are all resistant to death rebirth cycles. Let's be honest, because we're human. We are spiritual beings living a human experience, and death is terrifying. Even if it's small deaths to ourselves, death of an idea, death of maybe a concept that you had about yourself, right? It doesn't have to be your physical body dying. We die many times over in a lifetime in different ways. And that is the what Pluto is trying to do for us. And ultimately in our service for our greater good. My teacher likes to describe this as you've built a house, you're building a brand new house and you're so excited about it. You get an inspector to come out and you've got the foundation, the walls are going up, and you get an inspector to come out and they realize there's some sort of poisonous gases underneath the house. So you have to now tear down the house, rip out the foundation, dig 15 feet down and pull out that's toxic gases, right? And get rid of the toxicity and rebuild again. But ultimately, now you've changed your house plans a little bit and you end up liking it better than you did before. That's kind of the way she describes it, just as a really good visual of what Pluto does. And in the moment, of course, that's scary and it's infuriating. And you're like trying to figure out what's going on. Why is this happening to me? And because it moves so slowly, these lessons are slow and they really linger and hang out as Pluto transits through your chart. So Pluto lessons are slow because it's slow moving. So you might end up being in a Pluto transit for several years. And during that time, it's doing its work. But I promise you, it is nothing to be afraid of. It might be uncomfortable, but it is here to serve you. And one of the ways I like to describe Pluto too is it wants to rip all of your power away. It wants to leave you completely powerless, but ultimately it hands your power back to you. And it's that phoenix rising from the ashes and that you have more power and you know yourself better on the other side of a Pluto transit.
I wanted to just mention that you may have noticed that we didn't talk about the rising sign, which I'll add in real quick here, because our rising sign isn't technically a planet. Your rising sign is what sign was on the horizon on the day and time that you were born. So our horizon sign is like the mask we wear to the world. It's how people see us when they first meet us. It kind of reflects your costume that you wear to the world. And so people see your rising sign first, and then they see your sun sign, and then they see your moon sign typically. Is there anything you wanted to add about the rising sign?
Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up because there are multiple things in the chart too that we will be talking about later, like the nodes of the moon, which are a calculated point in space, but it's a very important calculated points in space. And they play a huge role in your chart, especially in evolutionary astrology, but they are not technically a thing like a planet or an asteroid. They're a calculation. So the same with your rising sign, it is a calculated point in space where the sun was rising somewhere on the planet at the moment of your birth. And it definitely is that mask that we wear, but unintentionally. We don't often recognize ourselves in our rising sign, specifically when we are younger. As we grow, we kind of grow into our rising sign and start to understand it better, incorporate it into our lives more, and really resonate with it more. But it's usually, like you said, the thing that people see first about you. It may even reflect in the way that you dress, but certainly the first impressions that you give off and sort of the filter that is put over your life.
Yeah. One of the things I do as a practicing astrologer is I try to guess people's, what their sign is.
I do that same thing.
Anything. Their sun, their moon, their rising.
Yes.
And I was at an appointment once and I was thinking, okay, I'm talking to the lady and I'm thinking, okay, I really think she's a Sagittarius. I think she's a Sagittarius. And then we got talking about astrology. And then she finally told me that she was a Pisces with an Aquarius moon. And then I was like, dang it. And then a few seconds later, she said, but I'm a Sagittarius rising. I was like, oh, yes, that's what I got because
that's what you got.
Mask she was wearing. And that's what I noticed first. So now I know that typically what I might see just meeting somebody is going to be their rising sign, not necessarily their sun sign or their moon sign, depending on the circumstances. But I thought that was a fun little.
Definitely. The more you get into astrology, you start to see the world through the lens of astrology. So you start to see the planets as they show up when you're speaking to somebody. So I even sometimes see the planets when I watch a movie or a show. I'm literally because I kind of almost see the planets as characters in a way and see like, oh, that's where Pluto shows up now. And like, there's going to be this, like big heavy thing that happens right in the middle. And then I start to notice these things in everything in life. And it's really fun.
Yes. And when you said characters, I always like to reference the movie Inside Out.
Yes.
In that movie, she has all these different personalities, and that's really how the planets come into play in your chart. Same scenario.
Same thing. Absolutely. And next week, we are going to hit on the last sort of piece or layer to the chart, and that is the aspects, all the lines that are crisscrossing in the middle of your chart. We are going to talk about the aspects and what they mean and how the planets talk to each other.
Thanks for joining us. Thanks for joining us under the stars today. We hope you're leaving feeling inspired, grounded, and more connected to your inner truth.
And if you loved this episode, we would be so grateful if you would subscribe, leave us a review, and share it with someone you love.
If you're ready to explore your soul's path through psychological, evolutionary astrology, and personal astrological coaching, you can find Mari at yoursoulpurposeastrology.com or follow her on Instagram and Facebook at Your Soul Purpose Astrology.
And if you're ready to illuminate your birth chart and explore how essential oils can support your emotional and energetic alignment, you can find Jody at earthandskyessentials.com or at Earth and Sky Essentials on Facebook and Instagram.
And remember, your soul is always guiding you.
The magic starts within.